Okay, good evening, guys. Today's lesson is going to be on the trig functions from the unit circle approach. This is log page 7 in your logbook. We're going to be using a circle of radius r to evaluate the trig functions to get our x, y, r definitions. Okay, we're going to let theta be a non-quadrantal angle, which means it is in a quadrant, and we're going to let it be placed in standard form. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw our angle. Draw our xy axis here. Let me turn this so you can see it. And we're going to actually draw a circle on the xy coordinate plane. And that's not beautiful, but it is a circle. And we're going to place a point on this circle. Now I hope you remember that the equation for a circle is x squared plus y squared equals r squared. And that is a circle with its center at the origin and a radius of r. Okay, we're going to draw our radius from the origin to the point that's on the circle. That then becomes a point xy. And then we can drop a perpendicular down to the x-axis. That's going to be a right angle. And now we have our angle theta, which is in a triangle, a right triangle. Now, if this point is point xy, then the distance from the origin to the right angle is going to be x, because we're going to go over x, and then the distance from here to the point is going to be y, because we're going to go up y units. Now, our radius of the circle we're going to call r. Now, what we know from previous lessons is that the sine of theta is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse, and the cosine of theta is equal to the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and the tangent of theta is equal to the adjacent, not the adjacent, the opposite over the adjacent. I was getting ahead of myself there. The opposite over the adjacent. And then we can just flip these over to get the other three. The cosecant is the hypotenuse over the opposite. The secant is the hypotenuse over the adjacent. And I need to put my thetas with these, sorry. And the cotangent is the adjacent over the opposite. Okay, so hopefully you remember all of that from our previous lessons. Now what we're going to do is look at our triangle that we've created here, and we're going to realize that the side that is of length y is the opposite side, the side that is of length x is the adjacent side, and the side that is of length r is our hypotenuse. So now we can just relabel our trig functions with the x, y's, and r's. So opposite over hypotenuse is y over r. Adjacent over hypotenuse is x over r. Opposite over adjacent is y over x. And then we just flip these over because they are the reciprocals. So now we have our x, y, r definitions, and you're going to need to know these because we're going to refer to them, we're going to start to refer to them instead of saying the sine of theta is the opposite over the hypotenuse, we're going to be saying it's y over r. These are your reference angles. I'd like for you to take a few minutes to copy these down, look at them, and see if you can understand the relationship between the angle theta that is drawn here for you and the reference angle. And the reference angle is defined in terms of theta, and I would like for you to see if you can figure out what we're talking about here with the reference angles. Which angles are the reference angles? And then tomorrow in class we'll look at these, we'll mark them, we'll highlight them so that you can make sure that you understand the reference angles. One thing I do want to point out to you is when we draw our triangles and our reference angles, notice the red perpendicular line that we're drawing there to the x-axis. that little line always has to be drawn to the x-axis. So in quadrant 1 and in quadrant 2, you're drawing it down to the x-axis, and in quadrant 3 and in quadrant 4, you're drawing them up to the x-axis. All right, so the next thing that I want you to see is the signs of the 6 trig functions. The big yellow A in the first quadrant stands for all trig functions are positive. All trig functions are positive in the first quadrant. In the second quadrant, the big yellow S stands for the sine and its reciprocal, which is the cosecant. They will be positive in the second quadrant. All of the other trig functions, the other 4 trig functions, would be negative. In quadrant 3, the tangent and its reciprocal cotangent are positive, and all others are negative. In the fourth quadrant, the cosine and its reciprocal secant are positive, and all others are negative. Now we use a little mnemonic to help us to remember this, and that little mnemonic is all students take calculus, because all pre-calculus students should take calculus. All 6 trig functions are positive in quadrant 1. Sine and its reciprocal cosecant are positive in quadrant 2. Tangent and its reciprocal cotangent are positive in quadrant 3. And cosine and its reciprocal secant are positive in quadrant 4. All right, now we're going to look at an example, and this will be the last slide that we're going to do today, and we'll try to get this uploaded so you can get your homework done. Example number 1 says to find the exact value of each of the 6 trig functions of an angle theta if 4, -3 is a point on the terminal side. So I'm going to draw my angle. Here's my initial side, and the point 4, -3 is a point on the terminal side of this angle. So here is my angle theta, right around here. And then we're going to draw the perpendicular up to the x-axis, and this is my little reference angle right in here. Okay, so we are going to find the 6 trig functions of this angle theta. So sine, cosine, and tangent. And then we're going to find the cosecant, the secant, and the cotangent. So the first thing that we're going to do is realize that the distance from here to here is 4 units, and the distance from here to here is 3 units. And because we're going down, you can think of that as going in the negative direction, which is 3, -3. So since this is a 3, 4, 5 right triangle, we know that the hypotenuse is 5. If you didn't realize that that was a 3, 4, 5 right triangle, you can use x squared plus y squared equals r squared, and say 3 squared plus 4 squared equals r squared. So that would give me 9 plus 16, which is 25, is r squared, so 5 is r. Now all we have to do is find our 6 trig functions. So here's my reference angle. I'm going to call that theta. And then we're going to do the sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse, which is 3 over 5. The cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse, which is 4 over 5. And the tangent is the opposite over the adjacent, which is 3 over 4. Now we're going to take the reciprocals of all those to find the other 3 trig functions. And now the last thing we have to do is find out what their signs are. Well, since we're in quadrant 4, and we know all students take calculus, we know the cosine is positive, we know the secant is positive, and all other trig functions are negative. And that's all there is to it. So copy these notes and be ready to come to class tomorrow and ask questions. Y'all have a good evening.